Welcome to the Let's Talk About Talking podcast with your host, Adrienne Fuller, language and communications expert for kids of all ages. On this podcast, we talk about speech, language, and all things happening with your child, giving you specific tactical information you can use to help your kids talk, listen, and thrive in their academic journey.
It's Adrienne Fuller. I'm a speech-language pathologist, also known as Miss A, the SLP. And today I'm going live and I wanted just to talk to you a little bit about, recently I have been doing a series on acronyms because I firmly believe that sometimes as professionals, we don't mean to because we're very well-meaning. We want to help a lot of people. But a lot of times we talk to, there he is. We talk to parents. We talk at parents instead of to parents. And one of the ways I feel that we do that is acronyms. And so I want to kind of debunk some of those and kind of just make it plain what all of these letters are. Because unless you've kind of been through or walk through having a special needs child, it can feel very overwhelming to parents. And sometimes that results in interactions that aren't productive or pleasant on either end. And so that's what I'm here for. I've asked a friend to join me this afternoon. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. But so far I've done just a few. I have done SLP. So SLP stands for Speech-Language Pathologist. I can kind of be particular about what I'm called because I feel like I did so much work to get the title. I have a master's degree. I went through a 9-month internship. And so I was a former teacher before, and so no shade to them or anything. But when people sometimes call me a speech teacher, I'm like, I'm a speech language pathologist, or you can call me speech therapist or speech language therapist. I like the therapist in my title. Some people don't care. I'm one that kind of does. If there's anyone on this chat that does care, go ahead and give me a heart or something. So we did SLP. We also did OT, which stands for Occupational Therapists. And so we did that. And remember, occupational therapists work with the business of being a child, the job, a person in their job, whatever it takes for them to be successful in their job. And so that is, for a child, a job is play. And so anything that helps a child in play, an occupational therapist most likely will handle. So things like fine motor skills, sensory, like the way they receive sensory input, such as noises or the sense of touch. In particular, with many kids that I work with, the OT works in that department. A lot of times also they work with handwriting, and so just the business of being a kid. So, well, that's what they do. This morning I released my ASD video, which stands for Autism Spectrum Disorder. And so that's what that is for. And the last one this past week I did a 3-part release of what is an IEP. So an IEP is an Individualized Education Plan, which is a legal document, by the way, parents and teachers and therapists and anyone who has their hands involved. So anything that is promised on that document, I always say, make sure you get. But I'm jumping the gun because I've asked one of my, I say she's a friend, but this is our first time meeting, but I'm so excited to meet her. Hi, Lorraine.
Hi, how are you?
I'm so good. Thank you so much for joining me. I love it. I love that you're here. I love to see like a face with, like, sometimes you do a lot of like infographics on your social media.
I do. You're right, I do.
Did y'all know she was gorgeous in these streets? We love it.
Yes, I will admit I'm very camera shy. I do hide behind the infographics. Yeah, you called me on the carpet on that, but I appreciate it nonetheless.
I was
Thank
like,
you.
wow, I love it. You're like a young gal that is camera shy. Like I hardly ever meet a youngin anymore that is camera shy. So you make your difference the way you make it, but girl, you could be on the camera.
Well, thanks to you, I am, and thank you for the invite. Thanks for stretching my comfort zone and talking about something that I am also very passionate about, and that is letting parents know what's in the IEP. And like you, I'm a former teacher. I taught fifth grade, yeah, I taught third grade, and I also taught varying exceptionalities here in Florida. That's more like your special education, self-contained classroom. So yeah, we have a similar background.
We have a very similar background. Everyone meet Lorraine Carey. She is the owner of Joyful Noise Speech and Language Services
Speech and language
therapy services in Jacksonville, Florida, which is kind of 2 hours up the street from where my neck of the woods is. So like we're both Florida gals. We should
Yes,
actually
yes.
talk a lot more than we do because like our practices are very similar. I know that you're doing good work up there, and kudos to you for being in the area. I see that you take all insurances. So if there are any listeners, we're going to put this on our podcast too, but in the Jacksonville area, she would be a great one to contact you guys. She does in-home
Yes.
and
Yes.
teletherapy, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so that's a great option. Hopefully we'll get to talking about virtual therapy because guys, just because the pandemic's over doesn't mean teletherapy needs to go away. For our practice, it's opened up and kept kids on way longer on caseload, right?
Yes.
Than possible, because you think, oh, my child really is easily distracted, but if they're getting a session online, a lot of times it's very beneficial. And you don't have to get in the car and drive to an office, parents.
Agreed. You don't have to worry about trying to rush from your 2:45 after school pickup to the 3:15 across town. But my child is hungry, so I gotta stop by Chick-fil-A. I hope the Chick-fil-A line isn't long. I mean, there are just so many things you can cut out when you do teletherapy.
And the Chick-fil-A line will never not be long.
No, you're absolutely right. It stayed A line and B line. They stay long. Absolutely.
Okay, so this all started. I reached out to you because I saw an amazing infographic on your social media about the IEP meeting. Lately, IEP meetings have really been on my heart because as a former teacher, we both know a lot of those meetings are not attended. And when I was teaching, I can't.
No, for better or for worse, you're absolutely right. They aren't attended, and we would love for parents to attend, and together we can demystify, some of their fears or concerns. Absolutely.
Yes. And so you put some, I believe it was 5 things that we should do. Can you talk about some of the things you think a parent should know, or how they can prepare for an IEP meeting?
Absolutely. One of the things parents can do to prepare for an IEP meeting is that they can write down their questions. And no question is too basic. We as professionals understand that we might be your first step into the special education world. For some parents, it was the ISFP or the IFSP, the Individualized Family Service Program for the birth to 3. And then when you step into the IEP arena, you're working with more people. It's a bigger space. So we absolutely encourage parents to ask questions. What does this transition look like? Or what does it even look like from the beginning? What services will my child receive? Who did the evaluations? What are the evaluations? What does this mean? So we like for parents to come with questions. And to parents, you don't have to come alone. You can bring your husband, your boyfriend, the ex-husband, the ex-boyfriend's ex-husband. You can bring whoever you feel comfortable with, because we don't want you going in there alone. Bring an ally. Bring someone who you feel comfortable with, who will help you ask the questions that need to be asked.
I'll just stop you. Let me just stop you right there. I love that you said you don't have to come alone. Honestly, one of the most surprising IEP meetings that I ever sat in on, a parent felt like she wasn't heard. For some reason, like her email wasn't responded to because I think it went in a junk mail folder. She brought an ally, which is someone who just works in the schools. She wasn't an advocate. She wasn't someone she paid, a family friend. And when I tell you that lady came in asking questions on behalf of the parent, you don't have to have someone do that, parents. But next thing I knew, there were like 12 people in the next meeting that was called because everyone was alerted to be on their P's and Q's. That doesn't always have to end that way, but the parent did not feel comfortable or she didn't feel like she was being heard, or she could be. So she brought some, and it got people moving.
Sometimes a few extra bodies will, it'll ruffle, not would say ruffle feathers, but like you said, it'll put people on their P's and Q's, and it will prompt you to ask questions or have their advocate ask questions for you. And in the end, if the child gets what they need, it didn't matter how many people were in the room or who you brought, because we were there to make sure the child got the services they need.
That's a good one. Okay, what else should they be? I love writing down questions because you have them in your head. They're probably keeping you up at night, mom and dad, caregiver. But when you get in the meeting with the people, sometimes the nerves come in or it doesn't go the way you think. So having the questions on paper or on your phone is a great suggestion. Anything else?
I think that parents can also reach out and, like you said, email their questions if you feel like it wasn't heard and it falls into the junk mail. Slip a note in the child's folder or meet the parent, their child's teacher at pickup. Like, hey, I just have a quick question about this. Old-fashioned face-to-face never hurts, especially if you're someone who drops your child off or picks your child up in the afternoons. You can always ask those quick questions. And if they turn into a long conversation, even better, because now your concerns were heard. And now moving forward in the IEP, we might have some things resolved ahead of time that will allow the process to go smoother.
And parent, if you feel like I've heard teachers say, they're trying, like they should schedule a conference, or you can always start that conversation with, I have a quick question, but if it leads to something bigger, I can schedule a conference or I can schedule a time. So no one feels like their time or they're being, I don't want to say disrespected, but their time is not being honored.
Yes, exactly.
Anything else before the IEP meeting or that parents should do before or to get ready for the IEP meeting?
I would say just come with your questions and bring an ally if needed. I think those are two great starting points.
I think we should start with, so 0.5. So you gave me like one, two, three things. 0.5 should be come to the meeting, right? Like, be sure that because now, because of the pandemic, virtual options are available, but even before the pandemic, phone options are available. And so sometimes they will be scheduled like in the middle of a day. And so for a working parent, they're like, well, there's no way I can do it anyway. I just won't come. But you can always ask to have it rescheduled, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, you're right. As a parent, think Doug versus the state of Hawaii. There was a big case out in like the Fifth Circuit out there that stated that as a parent, you have every right to request your presence be mandatory at the meeting. And even if the IEP goes out of compliance, which is a big thing that we really try to avoid in the special education world, it can go out of compliance if you as a parent really feel like you want to physically be there and have your voice heard.
Absolutely. Now, please help refresh my memory. The classroom teacher, their classroom teacher is invited to the meeting, and really a lot of parents come to that meeting to talk to the classroom teacher. So if for any reason that teacher is not in that meeting, the parent can request that it be rescheduled, right? The meeting be rescheduled?
Absolutely. And it really is in everyone's best interest to reschedule the meeting if the teacher can't be there, because there's so much information the teacher has, the little anecdotes, the things she might remember he did 2 days ago that's relevant. The teacher really should be there.
Absolutely. And so I do want to let parents know that IEPs, you guys, they run 1 year.
Yes.
And so every single year from the time you had that meeting, there should be another meeting either before that, but really not after that. A year from that date, right?
Yes. I like to tell parents that the IEP is a living document. It's not something that we bury. We don't just bury it when the meeting's over. It's a living document. And at any point you have questions or concerns about a goal, about an objective, about a service, just know we can meet back and say, hey, I feel like, 3 months in, I've noticed at home my child has met this goal. Can we adjust it? Or I feel like maybe we need to add a prerequisite skill. Maybe they weren't quite ready for that. Can we do this?
Mhm.
Absolutely. It's a living document, always open to interpretations and modifications as needed because it's a child grows, so the IEP should grow with the child.
Right. It's a living document. And so if
Yes.
you feel that parent, you need more services
Yes.
or less services, like
Yes. Yes.
we need more speech therapy, we need more OT, or
Yes.
we need the kid needs more accommodations or
Yes.
modifications, like they need more time on testing or
Yes.
extended time for assignments.
Yes.
This
Yes.
is don't just think it, you have to, for us, call the staffing specialist. In other counties or cities or even states, it might be called a different title, but
Yeah.
most are called the staffing specialist, who they need to get in contact with if you need to call a meeting. Is that correct?
It is different. I know that I've worked because I was a traveler prior to everything shutting down.
Me
I was
too.
the next time I hit an I-4 or 95 South, we're going to have to figure out a meeting point because we're not that far away. But I've worked in Nevada. I'm currently working a position in California. I've worked in Texas and Florida, and I've done a little things in New Mexico and South Carolina. So I've hit a few different states. Depending on who's the case manager, I would suggest that's the person you would want to reach out to with your concerns, because if it's a speech or language only child, take those things up with your SLP. If it's someone who's receiving those additional educational services, take it up with maybe the LSSP if that's the case manager, or that classroom teacher. So
And
definitely look for your case manager.
you just used an acronym. It was the L.
Thank you for that catch. Oh, I love it. The licensed school. Gosh, I wish the license. I'd have to look it up right quick. But yes, the LSSP. That is the person who tests the children.
Mhm. Okay.
Licensed specialist in school psychology. Your licensed specialist in school psychology is a person who often does a lot of testing and makes a determination and works closely with classroom teachers and the speech-language pathologist to determine who needs services and which services are most appropriate.
Great point there. That licensed, oh my gosh, what was it?
Specialist in school psychologist, because all we do is speak in acronyms. But yes,
Licensed
you're
specialists is
licensed.
still, yes, because
Yes,
just so parents know, a lot of times if you're requesting other testing,
yes,
gifted, learning
yes,
disabled,
yes, 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 yes.
autism too, I believe, right?
Yes, they do. They
They
do.
they do the test, the school psychologist does the testing. We don't do testing for those big things other than speech impaired or language impaired. And
Yes.
so sometimes when we get the testing, it's not
Conversation
always what
starting.
I like to get. It's not what we think it's gonna be. So just take that, like, we got testing. I always say sometimes you also want to either ask for a second opinion
Yes,
or get
yes,
outside testing if you can
yes,
afford it or
yes,
your insurance covers it. Like if
yes,
you have an insurance program like a Medicaid, people always
yes.
come down on it. A lot of our special kids with special needs have Medicaid just because
Mhm.
they fall into that category. And it is, to me, because we take almost every insurance, the best insurance for therapies. Would
Yes,
you
it is.
agree?
Yes, I do. I do. It
So,
fills the need. It fills that gap because I've said once, if we don't start now, when do we start? Because
right,
every week or every month is another week or month your child's skills become, the gap widens
it
and the
does.
delay gets bigger. And we do our best in the school system, but we are limited by time constraints. And if you can get that additional services with the Medicaid insurance, get
Mhm.
it, get it. No one else knows. There shouldn't be a stigma, or you shouldn't worry about what people think, because no one can see your insurance when you're at a Target. No one knows what your
Correct.
child is receiving in Starbucks. No one knows, but people will know when your child's speech improves, and they will know when your child's language improves because they're going to see that progress and growth.
So good, Lorraine. That is absolutely the case. And I'm telling you, I've met parents before and they'll say, well, they're already getting therapy in school. But guys, she brings up a good point. When we worked in the schools, I mean, I saw kids in groups, which is great for some, but really not great for others. I saw them not sporadically, but only 30 minutes, a group of
Yes.
6. And if
Yes.
your kid's
Yes.
working on like an R, which we don't do R's anymore in the schools, but like something that is really like a whole, what I call holes or gaps, that's very specific. Like we play a game in therapy sometimes, guys, and your kid gets to go twice. Like that's how we practice. They get to go 2 to 3, and it's just not enough reps. It's like going to the gym and doing like 2 reps, and you're like, I'm fit, but you're not fit because you're like,
Not by a long shot. No, not by a long shot. You're right.
And so the school does great things, and God bless what they're trying to do. So I'm never going to be like, never that.
Right.
But if you can get a private service along with, I mean, I just have seen the magic happen. It's just great. It just reinforces what they're doing in school. It's once a week. I mean, no insurance is paying for like hours on hours on hours, most. So get that kid session once, a 30-minute session once or twice, 3 times a week. It will be all the difference.
Like you said, once you're in a one-on-one with your own personal speech and language pathologist, we can easily get 100 to 150 reps in. We have the time after the session to have a 5-minute conversation with you and say, hey, this is what we did. This was our cue. This is your homework. See you next week. We have the option of giving those little, homework tasks that you can do before you brush your teeth, or heck, while you're driving home from your session. In a school system, we try to shoot for 100, but when you're, like I said, you're in a group of 5 or 6, because we're meeting the minutes per your free and appropriate public education, that FAPE acronym, they may not get to. Might get to 60 reps. We might get to 40 reps, depending on where your child is, but also where all the other kids are in their articulation journey as well. It's a challenge.
I'm telling you, I could talk to you for a very long time. I found this to be very helpful for our parents. And so I hope so too, because we really, guys, I know, and I wanted to say, parents, we know you're working and we know it's a lot, but there are decisions being made about your child in these meetings. So if do everything you can. Because I think special education is amazing.
But it is. It absolutely is.
And a lot of parents I meet will also say, I don't want my child to be labeled. I'm not here to say what's best for your child, but sometimes you just have to be aware of what's going on with your child. And it's okay to ask as many questions as you want.
Yes.
And be involved.
With a label comes assistance, and nothing is permanent. I told parents in our first meeting, this is not a life sentence. I'm here to get them in and get them out. So let's just go on this temporary journey together, and let's look to close the gap and set them free. Because especially when we're talking with those 3rd graders and those 4th graders, like, we don't really want them in the 11th and 12th grade getting pulled for any reason. In fact, we don't want them pulled in middle school. So let's do all that we can now. Let's front load them. So on the back end, we can set them free. We really do want to set them free.
I mean, gems being dropped, gem all through here. And let me just follow that up by saying, if we can get it early, like she said, the label is not a life sentence. Like, I had parents do everything in their power to avoid a label, and honestly, I'm like, we can get in and get out on this kid. Yes. And they would have been none the wiser. Like, we are playing when a kid is 2 and 3 and 4 and even 5, we're playing, guys. It's not like, I don't want my kid to be labeled. And I feel like that's sometimes their thing coming in, and it happens. But I'm telling you, earlier, they get many more services. So we are just big proponents of just get in and get out if you can. Because no one wants to see a senior in high school if we can help it.
I have, God bless it. And at that point, the service is now for the parent and not for the child. Once it gets to that level.
We won't even open that can of worms.
That's why I said it, and then I went like this, because you're right. That's a whole other live for another day.
But for today, I am so glad that you joined us. Can you just give the people your Instagram handles, how they can reach you if they need your services?
Absolutely. My name is Lorraine Carey, and I am the owner of Joyful Noise Speech and Language Therapy Services here in Jacksonville, Florida. I am an in-home therapist. I'm also a teletherapist. So please feel free to find me at Joyful Noise 904 Therapy. That's my Instagram handle.
Ah, Joyful Noise 904 Therapy.
Yes.
You are amazing, Miss Carey. You're doing great things. I appreciate what you're doing. And please, I hope that we can chat again soon. But thank you for joining me.
Thank you for the invite. I had a great time.
This was so, doesn't it like pump you up? I love this.
Actually, it does. Now I feel inspired to do more. Thank you. Thank you for this like great, amazing Monday boost.
Awesome. You have a great one. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
You've been listening to the Let's Talk About Talking podcast with your host, Adrienne Fuller, language and communications expert for kids of all ages. You can grab Adrienne's book, 30 Days to Get Your Toddler Talking, on Amazon or at speechbuilders.org.